Chris Pinner of Innerfit, welcome.
Thank you, Simon.
It's really good to see you, and anyone in the wellbeing industry can't fail to see your social media, your posts, your positivity around you, Innerfit, and what you're doing for the wellbeing industry. So for that, obviously, we applaud you. We've connected because we must find out more about you. We want to hear the problems that companies are facing and people are facing in general amongst this time, and what they could do. So to tee it up, maybe tell me a bit about you first, and then we'll go on to why you started Innerfit and what you are accomplishing.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction, Simon. In a nutshell, try and aim for 60 seconds. My name's Chris. Started my career actually with an investment bank and then strategy consulting for a couple of years, having done economics, so quite a different background. Then went into sports marketing for a couple of years, and that's when I realised that feeling well and working well are very much linked. I wasn't feeling well in the strategy consulting. I was working 35 hours in a row once and lots of days in a row as well. And contrast that with the sports marketing job. They were a Sunday Times top 100 employer, and I finished work at 5:30, 6 o'clock. And that's when I started qualifying as a personal trainer, coaching people on the side, and realized that it wasn't just me that had realized that. If you feel well, you work well. So about 4 years ago now, founded Innerfit on the belief that if you feel well, you work well. And also, secondly, that most workplace wellbeing doesn't actually drive change. There's a lot of amazing stuff out there, 100%. And we just think we should do it a little bit differently to actually help shift behavior and move the needle. So if that's about 60 seconds, that's a...
Yeah, that was perfect. For people in sales, that will hold you. That's good. That's good going. Look, a lot of people are going through transition changes at the moment, and I'm always interested in how people get started in business as well. What was the transition between you coming out of one profession and, throwing the camel to the wind and going into business?
So it sounds quite a big jump, actually, to go from strategy consulting to the sports marketing, because the strategy consultancy I was at was very much value-based. It was very much return on investment. I've spent probably about 1 billion hours in an Excel spreadsheet and PowerPoint. So on the face of it, it's very weird. But actually, the role that I was going into in the sports marketing industry was about measuring value, like measuring the return on investment of sponsorship. So the industry shift was very different, but the role itself was quite relevant. And so I suppose also relevant to Innerfit is this idea that results are really key. Most of us understand, especially if you're thinking about well-being, that it's the right thing to do and it's good, but probably a sales audience as well will understand this more than most. Like, it's about results, like what can you prove? And the same as in the sponsorship industry, there was a gap, no one was doing it. Same in well-being. Generally, I think people are catching on now to the idea that you do get business benefit from well-being, and it's not just this fluffy thing, it is a business necessity. But I think there's still a lot of work to be done on actually showing that business case is like concrete.
Isn't it all yoga and cross-legged mindfulness, though, this well-being malarkey? I mean, I've got a big business to run. I'm the head of a corporation, not me personally, obviously. I've got a head of a corporation. I've got things to do. I've got figures to hit. I've got revenue to get, quota, a number. How can this help?
Great question. So let's think about 3 levels. So good, bad, and ugly. I'd say if we start with ugly, the approach there is based on, let's just do it as a box ticking exercise. We'll do the yoga session every month. We'll do a fruit bowl, and that's well-being, done, tick. The bad, like a little bit better than ugly, but not quite good, is doing that. Also understanding that it needs to be a bit more coherent. So it's organizing the wellbeing days because it's Mental Health Awareness Week, and you think, right, we need to offer something here. It's listening to employees and what they say and acting on that. So there are different aspects of wellbeing, whether it be social, spiritual, financial, physical and mental. There are boxes being ticked there, and they are listening to employees, but fundamentally it's quite reactive rather than proactive, and it's quite ad hoc rather than strategic. So the wellness day, for example, will be organized 3 weeks ahead, and it will be organized because it is Mental Health Awareness Week, and we should do something for that. So I come on to good and even excellent. These companies know that wellbeing impacts performance because they measure it. They know that they are strategic about well-being because their calendar is based on what people have said they want, and also the business and the stats behind absenteeism, presenteeism, turnover, talent retention, talent recruitment, all of this stuff. Like, they know that well-being impacts performance because they're measuring it, benchmarking and assessing it on a quarterly, 6-monthly, annual basis, versus the ugly would never have thought about measuring well-being at all. And the bad, they might have an idea, finger in the air, that it's anecdotally impacted how people perform. But my answer, which is slightly longer than 60 seconds to come back to your original point, would be that the best know, like leadership know that it impacts the bottom line. And they actively encourage their teams and their line managers to attend, and they actively attend themselves because they know that they need to lead by example. So
I did a piece on
there. Sorry, I get excited.
Don't be sorry. And what we're after is passion, because collaboration is the way forward with this. Like everything, we're almost entering new ground, and it's going to be a few trailblazers like yourself that need to talk about what's going on. You talk about leadership, you're the leader of Innerfit, but where does this well-being come from? I mean, common sense would tell me it's top down.
Really good question again. So if we're talking about well-being and the touch points in an organization to almost create a culture of wellness, if that's what we're talking about, if we're really talking about if you feel well, you work well, and if we're really talking about driving change and well-being that actually works, it's got to be both. So yes, top down, spoken with global media company, for example, global construction company, right through to the smaller businesses. The leaders at the top, the ones where you've got the C-suite, the D-suite, the D-level managers really backing it, like that's when well-being and culture really changes. Equally, you have to listen. So the bottom up, we were talking yesterday about globalization with this media company. They've got offices in Poland and Germany and all these different places. So it can be helpful to have those guidelines from the top, but also you need to listen and have a mechanism to hear and have focus groups and understand, for example, that on Monday it's a bank holiday in some of Europe, but it's not in other areas. In America, there's different public holidays, you know. So it's got to be both, and that can be difficult, especially if you're a big company. But that's the way it works. It comes back to that basic principle of behavior change. If you have top down and you tell people this is the strategy, this is the plan, it's not their plan, so they won't buy into it. If they've had some say, just like someone in a one-to-one setting, it's a more coaching approach, like ask, okay, what's your goal? What do you want? What does well-being mean to you? And they might have a completely different answer to what the C-suite has. So it has to be both, which makes it more difficult, but also makes it more impactful.
Well, let's start with this then. For people to understand, if you're a leader that's not quite clear on what it is or how it affects the bottom line, what is well-being? I smile because I could never condense this one down.
This could
Over
be a
to you, my friend.
So for me, and it's important to say, for me, I think about well-being as a state of being well. Full stop. In a nutshell, if I was going to say as short as possible, state of being healthy and well. Obviously, it means different things to different people. Some people might think of it as purely the absence of being sick. Some other people might think about it being the top of your game, like super resilient, super productive, and everything in between. So talking with companies and people that have created strategies for businesses on well-being, like when we're talking about workplace well-being program or strategy, one thing I've come across is themes. So different companies might have mental and physical as their two pillars. Others might also include spiritual and social. Others might include financial, and again, anything in between. It really depends on what well-being means to the people they're trying to look after, which is why I said for me, that's what well-being means. But for different companies and different individuals, it's probably going to mean different things. And I'd imagine you've got your own perspective on that as well.
Yeah. Because let's talk obstacles for a second. The reason I feel like shining a light on it is because of an education piece, really. it's interesting for you to educate people, because I think that is the pre-contemplation start. In the same way that when you're doing Couch to 5K, it's not, this is how you run, it's trying to just coax people into a better way of life and understanding so that they even consider it as an option. So like, it would be easy for us to force well-being on companies now, and that would go straight to your ugly, which would be a tick box with fruit, slippers, dog, we're done, in the office. So maybe it's that education. So if we talk around obstacles about that, so one of the things I say that reporting mental health in your workplace is a bit like asking your mother-in-law to do your marriage guidance counselling. Okay, and by that I mean, okay, companies may have really good intentions, but I know you're typing it all down and it may come back to bite me in 3 or 4 months. And also, if that's the mental health side of it, which I think a lot of people think it is just all about mental health, and of course we know it's not, it's broader. The well-being side of it, when you look at your other side, the physical, I don't want anyone seeing me in Lycra shorts, thank you. And I've got better things to be doing with my lunch hour. So than running in a group thing with people at work. These are the things that I think we have to face to then understand and overcome. How much bigger is it just than group runs at lunch and reporting mental health?
Mm-hmm. It is so vast, and there's a few things in that question as well to follow up on, but it goes the full spectrum to what well-being means to that individual person. You might have Maureen in finance in Aberdeen, and you might have Tony in sales in the US. You know, like, well-being means different things to both of those people, but it's for leadership and the people responsible for well-being in the company to understand that and listen, at least give the option to listen. So it might well come back that you've got maybe 3 groups of people. So this is literally an example. I won't share the name, but we went through a process of understanding who we are trying to help, and we realized we had these 3 groups. So one were engaged, interested, like ready to go. They were the ones that are attending the yoga classes. They're also engaging in the less obvious activities on offer. 2 was interested but not engaged, so that they could be wanting to attend the wellbeing sessions and interventions on offer. They might want to look at the employee assistance program, that side of things, but they're not. And then 3rd, we realized we had a group who were disengaged and frankly disinterested. And that's okay, because you know where to prioritize your energy. And what we ended up doing was focusing on that 2nd group. We knew that we had some wellbeing champions in this 1st group. And so the 2nd group were really the interesting ones for us, because that's where the most value could be added. And then if you can start to snowball almost with that 2nd group and the 3rd, the disengaged, disinterested, might just think, okay, yeah, I could get involved there. Because even on a subconscious level, the message is getting through. And this idea kind of came back from a personal trainer I know who also became a psychotherapist. To your point on mental health, he realized he was just ill-equipped to deal with the types of questions he was getting. And in a similar position myself, I started off doing a lot of one-to-one consultations and a lot of one-to-one training. And I've probably had a conversation on pretty much 90% of mental health challenges you could have, because you realize physical and mental well-being is so linked. And someone has a training goal and a fitness goal, but actually it runs so much deeper a lot of the time. So coming back to your point, that psychotherapist made me realize that even if someone doesn't engage, they might still be hearing you on some level, and just becoming more receptive to the idea that, yeah, even if a fitness class isn't for me, I don't want to put my Lycra on and sweat in front of other people, which is perfectly fine. There might be something else for them, and they feel included in the overall offer that you're putting together.
Yeah, I agree with everything you say. I'm trying to translate it because we deal with the sales industry as a whole and senior leaders, etc. And it sounds to me like one big marketing sales funnel. People don't know they want your product, so you have to get some content out there and educate around why then you get the no-goes, you ring them up and they go, no, that's it. And they're not lost leads, but they're going to be hard work. You get the cold leads, which you think, oh, I've got a bit of interest here, I'll put them on a database and keep that marketing going out to them. Warm, and then you've got, like you say, the well-being champions, which are where do I sign up? So from what you're saying, it's really interesting how I've just translated that and how leaders might think of that. That I think what I'm getting from you is that they need different levels of input at different stages of that cycle.
Definitely. And I suppose where my mind started to go when you relayed that back was that a lot of the time wellbeing does need to be pitched. And one of the big hurdles you come across is just proving the business case for wellbeing. And leadership, inevitably, if they don't believe in it, it's not going to work. To go back to the ugly versus bad and good framing, ugly just looks like leadership don't care.
Yeah.
Even if they're doing something, people can see through that, and people are not stupid. If you're saying you're doing the right things, but you don't turn up to the sessions yourself and you don't believe in it, people know, like, people are smart. And so if you're thinking about performance and sales and relaying it back to that, like, I'd say if people really get it, they from what I can understand of your audience, they've got the tools and the knowledge to be able to pitch it in and get the budget and buy-in, then that becomes pretty magic, because you can prove that it's working. So proving a correlation between well-being and performance has literally been done. Like, there are companies out there doing that right now, statistically proving a positive correlation coefficient exists. And they're global companies right through to smaller companies. People with head of well-being and a little team, they're just one head of well-being running it as kind of part-time job. Like, that proof exists. So there's lots of anecdotal stuff, there's lots of stories, there's also statistics. And I think the magic happens when your sales team, for example, can see that the top quartile performers are the ones that are participating in the wellbeing initiatives. That's when you really start to prove the business case, not just in general, but specific to your company.
I knew this conversation would go on, because every time you mention something, it triggers something else. And I've got here a new generation coming through, which actually, you were talking about top performers, and I liken it very much to the old days of Gazza in football, and the rugby lot when Dino was captain of England, and they were drinking during the week after sessions. There was very much of that culture going on. Now, of course, you don't go near it if you're a professional elite sportsman or woman looking to perform well in your game. So is that creeping into industry here?
Definitely. I mean, where my mind's gone when you've asked that is about talent. And you can use different words: talent, people, fundamentally, like the people that you want to bring into the team, and also who you want to retain. I think there's a statistic around 52% of people, millennials, would choose a company that cares about their well-being over one that pays 10% more. So I think your point, or the question which gets at the point of talent, for me, and how I interpret that, 100%. If you want your top performers, the people that are really going to care about the business, they're going to stay for a long time, they're going to really turn up to work each day and feel committed and engaged, I think well-being is a big part of that, and an increasing part of that as well. So that's on the really positive side. On the other side, I'd be interested to know what a lot of companies' costs are in terms of losing talent, losing the best people to competitors that are really caring about this. I think if you include training and development costs, you include recruitment fees, you include absenteeism and presenteeism as well, to expand this even more broadly. There are some seriously big hidden costs, which a lot of the time in my experience, whether it would be the HR department or elsewhere, they're not fully known. They're really not fully known. But when you start to dig under the hood of how many people we lost last year, what's our turnover rate, 5%, 10%, and it costs X pounds to recruit someone, that's when it gets interesting. I think that is when you start to shift perspective.
Yeah, I completely agree, because I think it was the CEO of Lloyd's who went on record about his tales of resilience and talked about his depression. I think it was depression. I don't want to misquote him, but and I hear that their absenteeism went down about 15% because people were raising the conversation around depression. Now that's when it gets interesting on the bottom line. I look at these things, like these old-fashioned things like sales kickoffs, with a new eye now, and I think COVID has really given me. So you go there, you go on a great jolly for 3 or 4 days to Las Vegas or Barcelona or London or wherever it is. You're expected to perform. And you can't keep flogging a racehorse without attending to its wounds, its hooves, its give it rest, give it food and everything else. Yet on these kickoffs, you come back absolutely knackered. Where we still think people have to stay up till 4 o'clock in the morning because that's when the deals are done and getting smashed. But you know, this everything's changing. What about the people who value their health and well-being? They want to go to bed at 9 and perhaps they would network just as well, but within a different group at 7 o'clock in the morning on a yoga or a group run. Is that something that you're seeing changing with the, you know, we've gone top down, but are you seeing it from bottom up as well? People.
Yeah. So my initial instinct again is to say yes. I suppose I just caveat it with obviously the types of conversations I have is generally with people in that good or wanting to be good bracket. So immediately I'm not seeing a load of companies that are doing it the kind of the old way, for lack of a better phrasing. But one example that's coming to mind, head of sales, global sales company, affiliate marketing, and she's super into her yoga and exercise 5 days a week. Like we literally traded emails this morning. She is running a global sales team and herself has voluntarily started to do a Science of Happiness course in her spare time. Like, that's cool. And similar to the story you shared about Lloyd's, she opened up a little bit about her story in a global sales meeting that we did. And she'd invited me along to do a couple of talks. We spoke about movement and mental health and the link between the two, and then motivation and healthy habits. And that was part of their 2-day sales meeting. So they had people in from Australia, America, all the different places, and literally integrated into that working day was Wellbeing, and integrated into that day was her sharing her story. And as a consequence of that, got some amazing feedback. Also, she found out a few things about some of her team. In that evening drink session, some of them came to her and shared their stories. We're really, really grateful to her for sharing. And so, yeah, I think, again, I'm seeing the good part because that's the type of people and company that you inevitably work with, attract. But for me, like, it depends on how quickly you can change and update yourself to the new way of doing things, rather than if, because I think it's going to be survival of the fittest to an extent. If you want to think about that, I think that the sales teams and the sales leaders that prioritize this as part of the sessions, like the global sales things, will be the ones that do well.
Yeah, and going back to your client who you were talking about then, I mean, what a great employee to have. and global sales leader, someone that cares about others, cares about themselves, and is doing something about her own performance in this case in order to push her and the business forward. That strikes of authenticity to me. We use the word authentic so much. I see a lot of sales leaders going on stage talking about mental health is a problem and everything. Do you know what? Great, they're raising the subject, but continually raising the topic is not finding a solution. By continually diagnosing and saying and repeating is not actually doing a practical thing to do anything about it. And that's when they would turn to guys like Innerfit, I presume.
Yes. So the reason I say yes again is not just to agree with you, Simon, because you've been kind enough to organise this. But we did a bit differently because we are all about action. So there's a few things that make us different. If you feel well, you work well. Most people would say that. But second point on workplace wellbeing that actually works. We believe it works because we know it does. We've seen it. We get the feedback. And what we try to do that's different is offer accountability after a session. So let's say we did a virtual webinar, and in that session we were talking about movement and mental fitness. And in that session you have a 10-minute breakout in which people go and talk about their own situation. Like, how do you feel when you're fit? How fit are you feeling right now? That get people talking. To our point before, it's about them. It's not about us. They don't need to know all the science and how much we know about well-being. They need to talk about themselves, and then we can share what's relevant. But at the end of that session, we would offer accountability. So if you are the type of person that works better with accountability, tick yes, and one of the Innerfit team will get back to you in 7 days and ask, how are you getting on? So Simon, 7 days ago, you said you were going to commit to 1 extra hour sleep. How are you getting on? Winky face. Oh no. That's okay. How bad are we talking?
Oh, that's it's an incredibly good point, because you always have to keep an eye on your own. You can preach as much as you want to, but you've got to keep an eye on your own. Sleep, I will go on late into the evening and then look to try and hopefully make some overnight. Yeah, it would be some education around that piece for me. But I get your point. Would there be someone that I could then check in with to hold me slightly accountable for that?
Yeah, exactly. So one of the Innerfit team, whether it be myself or one of the other guys, generally would hear about success is usually the way it works. And if it's not success, it's about what N+1 looks like. So we did a session this lunchtime, and we're thinking about how well are you moving right now? And someone answered 3 out of 10. They are really struggling to be as active as they want to be. They basically got half an hour in the day to move, and they're at 4,000 steps rather than the normal 10,000 plus. And so they were at a 3 out of 10. So the question there was, what is N+1? How do you get to 4 out of 10? It's not about, oh, Simon, you're not sleeping enough. How can we get you to be the perfect epitome of sleep and lead by example for the world? It's about how can you do that tiny little bit more. And that's what makes it practical. I think it can be easy to bombard people with information. Maybe someone's watching this thinking, oh my God, I wish this guy would stop. But actually, just the small bits, small, shrink the change, and the science says your behaviors and your habits catch up.
I don't think anyone watching this will be saying to you stop, because you've got a very affable, relaxed feeling about it. It sounds like you very much want people to just make those first steps, relax, and then we'll take over. We'll look after it from here. But getting people in on their own merit that's how I'm interpreting it.
Exactly, yeah. It's the opposite of preaching, I guess. And I mentioned it before on the call. I'm a firm believer that you've got 95% of the answers already. Yes, there's science runs deep. Like we could talk about rapid eye movement, we could talk about deep sleep versus whatever sleep. There's a lot of science behind it. But I'd imagine, like, what could you do? Yeah, what could you do you think to get that sleep closer to where you want it to be?
I know what I need to do. I need to not have a glass of wine. I need to not have screen time before bed. I need to put my worries away nice and early. And then I don't know, then we're talking to sleep people at the moment, then, I don't know, have a better bedroom environment. But it's just getting them to creep to the top of your to-do list, isn't it? And I suppose, what does that come with? Self-value, or putting yourself at the top of the list? When do you ever write down on your list of 28 things by the end of the day that you're carrying on into the next day? Look after me. Make sure you have a good breakfast. Put the run in your diary. Very rarely does that happen. For me, and if it doesn't happen for me, it won't happen for others. And I just think, let's be normal. Let's talk normally. We all have fallables, and we all have things that creep into the day. Just admit it and welcome them. Don't fight them, and then deal with it from there.
That's it. I mean, it's the challenge that we all face, and it's important to make this real, I suppose, because the hope would be maybe someone right now is watching this thinking, yeah, I know what I need to do as well. And I've just said, but all the answers you gave, by the way, spot on. There's all science behind each thing you pointed at. The hope would be someone else is maybe watching this thinking, yeah, I know what I need to do. And prioritizing your health, your well-being is a choice. It's something that habitually most of us actually don't do. So maybe N+1 looks like 1 day out of 7 doing something for you. It's not 7 days out of 7 for a lot of us. And we talk quite a lot about this oxygen mask analogy. So if you're on a plane, you've got to put your own oxygen mask on before you can help anyone else. And I would use that analogy right back to sales and managing teams and living your life and looking after your family. So taking care of your kids. Like you're going to be a better parent or a better leader if you're healthy and well. And so, again, we know that. Like, if you feel what you want, you know that. So in practice, why don't we do it? And that's the interesting bit. because that's when you get into your behavior change and your psychology side. And there's lots of different ways you can approach that. Again, it's what do you think is best? How can you do that? And one person a couple of years ago, it was literally writing in an Excel spreadsheet every Sunday evening. Her health was put in first, like physically, like the most explicit way you could say I'm putting myself first is to put it in before anything else in the diary. Obviously, you've got work blocked out to an extent, but meditation, yoga, whatever that was, even just having a bit of fruit or drinking some water, like put it in the diary first would be a very practical idea that's come up before. But everyone else is going to have their own version of that, you know.
Still a very antiquated language around that we're using. It's very 1980s. For example, mental health, right? I know that people, you go to a senior leader and say, I want you to stand up in front of 6,000 people and tell them you're mentally ill or you've got a mental health issue. You know, mental in my day was a term that at school people would call people in not a nice fashion. It would be like an insult. And I would be hearing this around the playground. So why now we're expecting people to come out and admit to something where there's an insult in the very diagnosis of what we're meant to be, coming out and feeling at ease to admit to? If we change that round to a resilience, or asking people when they were resilient, building this massive company, did you ever have a time when you were getting punched in the face by life and your back was against the wall, but you came through it in some way, didn't you? Or did you let everyone know how you felt and try and inspire it? Well, you know what? Senior leaders will come out in their droves to tell you those stories, and that's exactly the same, and that will inspire. Mm-hmm. And also, like you've just said, people don't put me time in. People still think it's selfish. That word's selfish to think about yourself. Mm. What are your thoughts on that?
So many things like popping off in my head. So I'll try and, there's definitely three, so I'll try and cover those off. The first on mental health, there's definitely connotations with that phrase. Like when I just said mental health, people will have just thought some stuff. And if I was to say mental fitness, different. So it has something to do with the fact that overwhelmingly the research into mental health has been negatively skewed. So the research, if you look at literally like Google Scholar, meta reviews on mental health, most of it's about the absence of sickness. It's about the absence of depression. It's about the absence of unhelpful stress and anxiety, because some stress can be helpful. So that's one thing that came in. Changing our definition and language towards something like mental fitness is something I've seen companies do. And again, it has different connotations. Mental fitness, all of a sudden you start to think about cognitive performance and accessing a flow state and being the best you can be and thriving and performing and hitting targets and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think one was language. Two, what was the second point? What else did you say, Simon?
So I was talking about mental health, giving yourself permission.
Yes. Yeah, giving yourself permission. It is being selfish, but that's fine, because you're able to help other people better. And
even the word selfish, looking after yourself, that just change the word selfish and put prioritizing. Well, this is my point. We're hardwired to think that well-being is still a luxury and only for the few. But look, you don't need to be rich to have an enriched well-being life, do you?
No, not at all. I mean, there's so many myths and misconceptions around how expensive it is to eat healthily. You know, like a balanced plate of food doesn't need to cost loads. Everyone's got a different budget, but the key ingredients of a balanced plate of food can be affordable. The same with movement. To your point on language and definitions, at Innerfit we talk about movement as opposed to fitness, and because movement is looser. Again, this is movement. I'm standing up right now so that I can move my ankles around a little bit. That's movement. Everyone's got their own definition of movement. It could be sorting your shoulders out because your posture's been like that all day. So yeah, I think again it's a spectrum. You don't have to be rich to be well. Not everyone needs Lululemon pants at £200 a pop kind of thing, you know.
It's crazy.
I'm sure you'd look great in them though.
Yeah, how do you know I'm not? How do you know I'm not wearing them?
Yeah.
Why do you think I'm sitting down, Chris? Right, top 2 inches. So well-being for me is for me the direction that you're traveling in, because I know that when I was going down, it's quite a scary place actually to go down, because you don't know where the bottom is, and you only know where the bottom is when you've come off the bottom. And in my case, it was going down the road and happened to sing to a song and realising I hadn't sung in a car for 6 weeks. Now that's really scary. So it's about direction. Now the problem is I suppose in the workplace is that, well, it's not one cat fits all, is it? Because say you've got 5,000 people, say you've got 30 people in an office, or 4, they're all going to have different life streams, and they're all going to be going through in different directions. So how do you get to them before they ring the alarm bell?
Yeah, it's a good question. I suppose at that point it's worth taking a step back and thinking about what the role of workplace or team, colleague or friend is, because I think most of us at some point will have our own ups and downs, you know. So it's not perfect wording, but you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So I think if we're thinking about colleagues and the workplace environment, it's really important to be aware of what support is available, be one thing. The CIPD have got some good guidance in terms of helping managers recognise mental health signs that someone's struggling. It's worth being aware of a company what support is on offer in terms of employee assistance programs, and mental health first aiders has obviously got a lot of traction recently. So fundamentally, I guess it comes down to being aware of how other people are feeling as much as possible. Obviously looking after yourself as well, because again, that's, if I think about people I've spoken to and my own stories, like it's hard to be aware of exactly where you are when you're in it.
Yes.
So yeah, I think it's being self-aware, also trying to recognise other people's situation as well is important. That's what came to mind.
Great. And I think what's really clear in this conversation is that well-being affects everyone. So if you're saying that it doesn't affect you, if you're a human with blood going through you and air going into your lungs, you have emotions, and therefore you have ups and downs. So you're on the radar at some point. We normalise the conversation around that. It'd be just like talking about the flu. Who cares? That's one thing. And the other thing is it affects the bottom line financially. A reduction in absenteeism affects the bottom line, and fitter performers in terms of their sales and targets or whatever line of industry they're in are going to perform better. So how do people get hold of Innerfit, and what do you offer as a first point of contact?
Yeah, thank you. So definitely do please get in touch if you've got any questions, if you're personally looking for some help or as an organisation want support. You can get in touch with myself personally, chris@innerfit.co.uk, or to one of the team at hello@innerfit.co.uk, and we'll pick it up and get back in touch. If you want to find us, the website is www.innerfit.co.uk, and you can also find us on all the social media stuff as you'd normally expect. So, but yeah, please do get in touch. Like this is all about starting a conversation and getting to know you on a personal level. Typically, how we might do that varies depending on what you need, but we've got some tools and questionnaires to help for free to kick off, just to start that conversation going. So yeah, honestly, like, couldn't be happier to hear from you guys.
Great. So just like we've talked about fitness in general, the first thing is just picking up the phone or getting an email across, and then what, you just get in touch with them and you have a chat, probably on Zoom now more than likely, I would imagine, and then talk them through. So that the point really is, doing nothing is not good enough. Just pick up the phone, talk to an expert. Look, at Wellity, we promote experts. We're a platform that promotes experts because we want everyone just to start talking about it. So we will be doing our very best to get as many people to be making contact with you as possible. And that'll just be an initial contact, and you do the rest.
Yeah. I mean, we had one today, for example, and it was just a conversation so that they understood. They were at the beginning of their wellbeing journey at that company, and they wanted to understand what we could offer. Other people, someone last week was pretty clear, and they downloaded the strategy questionnaire from the website, and in that questionnaire there's 3 buckets of question. What is your vision and challenges? 2 is what's your approach today? And 3 is what results are you measuring? So that was a much more structured conversation and quickly gets you to some practical steps to take. Again, it really depends on where you are in your journey as a workplace wellbeing provider, I guess. Wellbeing.
Great. Well, look, we're going to be talking a lot more over the next few months and years. No one can do this on their own. It's too big a thing to do on their own. And like you, we look forward to collaborating, sharing best practice and working together. So I really appreciate your time. Right back at you, Simon. Thank you so much for organising. Thanks for all the questions. And look forward to working with you as well. Great. Thank you, Chris. Pleasure, Simon.